It was the summer after college, and a group of us decided to reunite for a weekend getaway in the serene wilderness surrounding our alma mater. I took charge of organizing our accommodation, opting for an isolated Airbnb cabin nestled deep within the forest, far from prying eyes and noise complaints. The cabin sat majestically amidst a vast expanse of lush greenery, with towering trees forming a protective barrier against the outside world. I stepped inside, and the spacious interior exceeded my expectations. It was a haven of rustic charm and modern comforts, promising an unforgettable retreat. After settling in, I exchanged my city attire for hiking gear and set out to explore the surrounding wilderness. The forest beckoned with its myriad trails, each one offering the promise of adventure. Venturing deeper into the woods, I stumbled upon a clearing adorned with weather-beaten tents and makeshift huts. It was a curious sight, hinting at a past unknown to me. Despite the eerie atmosphere, my curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured closer to investigate. As I wandered through the abandoned campsite, a sense of unease settled over me. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. Something about the deserted tents sent shivers down my spine, urging me to retreat back to the safety of the cabin. Upon my return, however, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. A figure stood motionless in the field, casting a wary glance at the cabin. Instinctively, I ducked behind a nearby tree, observing the stranger's movements with growing apprehension. They seemed out of place in this remote wilderness, their presence unsettling in its ambiguity. With bated breath, I watched as the stranger disappeared into the shadows of the forest, leaving me with a lingering sense of disquiet. Hastily, I secured the cabin, barricading every entrance against the unknown threat lurking outside. Nightfall descended like a shroud, cloaking the forest in darkness and heightening my senses to every sound and movement. Sleep eluded me, the weight of uncertainty pressing down upon my weary mind. It was then, in the dead of night, that the tranquility of the cabin was shattered by the deafening crash of breaking glass. Heart pounding, I sprang into action, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I armed myself with whatever makeshift weapon I could find. Racing to the source of the disturbance, I discovered a shattered window, moonlight streaming through the jagged shards to illuminate the chaos within. The field, vanishing into the depths of the forest before I could discern its identity. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, dialing the authorities and recounting the night's harrowing events. In the days that followed, the tranquility of our reunion was marred by lingering fear and uncertainty. Despite the police investigation and assurances from the Airbnb owner, the mystery of the stranger in the woods remained unsolved, casting a shadow of doubt over our idyllic retreat. Yet, amidst the lingering unease, there was a sense of camaraderie that bound us together, a shared experience that forged bonds stronger than any fear. And as we bid farewell to the cabin in the woods, I couldn't help but wonder if some mysteries were best left unsolved, lost amidst the whispering trees and echoing silence of the forest. During a road trip I was on this year, I stayed at 2 Airbnbs. Both were just overnight stops for me to sleep at, not so much to actually enjoy. I drove for 10 hours from my house to the first Airbnb, which was out in a small town in the middle of nowhere. When I arrived, I wasn't expecting it to have been as small of a town as it was, though in total there were no more than 30 or 40 homes, with a single grocery store and a few other markets in the center. I pulled into the driveway of the Airbnb. It was listed as a single-bedroom home, and the pictures were pretty nice, except it never displayed the outside of the house, and I could see why. It was old, and likely hadn't had any exterior work since it was built. All that mattered was the inside, but seeing that didn't keep my hopes up. I got out of my car and got my bag from the trunk. As I walked up to the front door, I felt something strange. I stopped and listened, hearing total silence throughout the entire town. It was late, so it was probably normal to be quiet at this time, but I'd never been in a town this small before, and even at night in most places there's some sort of noise. But here there was not a single sound at all. I went up to the door and opened the lockbox, then put the key in, only to find the door was already unlocked. Slowly, I opened it and called out, asking if someone was home. I didn't hear anyone, and the inside seemed to be empty with all the lights off. So I went in and made sure to lock the door behind me. The first thing I did was walk around the house to see if everything was okay. It was much nicer on the inside than it was on the outside, and the door being left unlocked I assumed was a simple mistake because there were no other signs of anything unusual. I went to bed just 15 minutes after arriving, needing to get up to drive in less than 8 hours. I fell asleep quickly, but woke up a few hours into the night. I was tired and only half awake, unsure why I even woke up. I turned and checked my phone for the time, and that's when I heard something from outside the room. It was a dull thump, like something hitting the wall. I jumped out of bed and looked at the door with wide open eyes. The sound was gone now, but I slowly opened the door and checked the hallway. It was empty, nothing on the walls either to show for the thump I heard. I stepped further down, keeping the lights off, and looked around the corner into the living room. A man was sitting on the couch facing away from me, staring forward into the unlit room. My stomach dropped, and I froze up, watching him sit there without moving, like he wasn't worried about being in someone else's house. I carefully and quietly walked back to my room and locked myself inside, calling the police. Being so far out, I was sitting in the corner of the room in silence, waiting for an entire hour for the officers to arrive. During that hour, I never heard any sounds from outside the room, not even a footstep or a thump. But when the police came in and looked around, the man was gone. The only sign of him was the front door being unlocked once. The officers left. I continued with my road trip, not wanting to spend any more time in that town. A while ago, I rented an Airbnb near my family in Arizona. I'd used Airbnb tons of times before and had great experiences, often skipping hotels entirely and going straight to looking for Airbnbs whenever I'm planning a trip. When I got to this rental, I did as I always would. It was just after 9 p.m. and I went up to the door. It had a keypad on the handle, so I got my phone out to see if I was emailed a code, but before I could even check, the door opened. A man greeted me as the host of the Airbnb and invited me in. I'd never once met the host of an Airbnb because they always just had a key or code to get into the house, and I never said when I'd be arriving here, so he had to have either been waiting for me or was just at the rental for some reason. Even more surprising, he started giving me a tour of the house. I didn't say much, being confused and unsure what to make of it, but the man talked almost non-stop. Once we walked the house, he asked if I had everything I needed, and finally left. I situated my belongings in the room, then called my parents to let them know I had made it into town and went to bed. In the morning, I did a more personal walkthrough of the house, checking to make sure there were no hidden cameras and whatnot to satisfy my paranoia. As I did, I realized one of the doors that the host said was a closet had a lock on it and couldn't be opened. I assumed it was for cleaning supplies or extra things the host had in storage and didn't think much of it. I met up with my family for most of the day, eating out and walking through the parks. I got back to the Airbnb just after sunset. I headed in through the front door and started getting ready to shower, but after not even 5 minutes, the power went out. I searched through the dark for my phone and turned on the flashlight. I didn't have anything running that would cause a shortage, so I had no idea why this would happen. I walked through the rooms looking for the breaker box, but could not find it anywhere. After 15 minutes of no power and no luck with finding the switches, I texted the host. He replied quickly, telling me to hold on for a minute, and just a moment later, there was a knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw the host was standing on the porch. I opened the door and he quickly walked inside, having a flashlight in his hand already. He said he was just a few streets down when I texted him, but he was here so quick and even had a flashlight prepared, so I was already put off. I had a bad feeling in my gut about this. As I followed him until he stopped by the locked closet, he took out a key and opened it, asking me to hold the flashlight for him as he went in. When I shined it into the closet, there was a staircase leading into a basement. It caught me off guard and instantly made me uncomfortable. He got halfway down before turning and asking me to come down with a light so he could see. Maybe it was the way he said that, or just a sudden click in my head that made me think about everything, and how unnecessary it was that I had to be the one holding the flashlight and go down there with him. It made me think he was using this as some sort of trick to get me to follow him into the basement that he previously never mentioned. Without saying anything, I backed away and ran out of the house, calling the police as I hid next to a neighboring house. The host didn't follow me and even stayed when the police got there. When questioned, he said it was all a misunderstanding. But when the police searched the house, they found the electrical box was on the outside of the house behind a bush, and the power switch was manually turned off. As for the basement, it was nothing but an empty room. Regardless, nothing was enough to prove anything, and it unfortunately reached a stalemate. I'm willing to bet my life that he was the one to cut the power, but what he intended to do when he got me into the basement is something I don't even want to imagine.